Welcome to Vvox Sex and the Mind podcast. I'm your host, Sangeet Sebastian. I'm a sexuality educator and founder of Vvox, a platform with a mission to eradicate sexual shame. In today's episode, we are going to talk about some of the problematic masturbatory techniques that can inadvertently make a significant number of men unable to have partner sex. Joining me in this conversation today is Dr. Lawarence I Sank, a world-renowned sex therapist and researcher who pioneered the research and treatment on PRONE masturbation in men around the world with a sensational article which he published in the Journal of Sex and Marital Therapy in 1998. Dr. Sank is also a co-founder of Vvox. Hi, Dr. Sank. Welcome back to Vvox Sex and the Mind podcast. You pioneered the study on PRONE masturbation among men with a path-breaking research published in the Journal of Sex and Marital Therapy in 1998 called Traumatic Masturbatory Syndrome. To our listeners who are not familiar with the term PRONE masturbation, it is a face-down masturbatory technique engaged in by a large minority of men, around 10% in the world, without realizing that it can make these men impotent or unable to have partner sex. Dr. Sank, can you please tell us what makes PRONE masturbation or traumatic masturbatory syndrome, as you called in your research study, so problematic and dangerous?
Well, the reasons why it may cause a problem, and I would emphasize that the operative word here is may, that not every member of that 10% is going to have that problem. It would be a reflection of whether or not that technique is used exclusively,
okay,
and the extent to which we're talking about frequency and amplitude. Frequency is often, and amplitude is how vigorously.
Okay.
So those are important variables. As to why it can result in the problem of impotence or having ejaculatory problems may be a result of micro injuries that occur. These infinitesimally small, let's say on a cellular level, these injuries can sum to where there is a problem.
Okay.
Or it could be a reflection of desensitizing the young man,
okay,
and that there's over time no other way for him to become aroused, because his, if you will, nerve endings, the receptor sites, have become so accustomed to the and the that actual position that options don't result in that same level of arousal.
Okay. Do you think that the excessive pressure which is applied on the penis during PRONE masturbation can be a reason why it can lead to desensitization?
I very much do. If you think about the weight of the man pressed down on his penis, that's so much more than what would be used in the, quote, normal or more usual technique. There's also many a man that I'll speak to, it isn't just that he's rubbing his penis against, let's say, a mattress with his full weight on that, but sometimes that in addition to that, he'll be grasping his penis, or he'll have a rolled up bed sheet of some sort. Okay. So that also adds to the level of friction. Okay. And that intense level of friction can, at least in terms of my thought about the etiology of this problem, that intense level of friction can desensitize the penis to other forms of less vigorous forms of stimulation.
And also, I believe that kind of friction you will not receive in partner sex, right? The same kind of.
You will not see it in partnered sex.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Yeah. Doctor, why do you think some men end up learning masturbation in a very eccentric way?
I think that it can be just chance, serendipity, that's the technique that they first came upon. It worked. It's pleasurable. Hey, you know,
Okay.
if it ain't broke, then why change?
Yeah, it's a convenient technique. Yeah, for that.
Yes, some men are more adventurous, so they just have a variety of techniques, and for some, it's a matter of not just convenience, but also necessity. It could be that lying down is the only technique that that they're allowed, given the limited amount of privacy they would have, because after all, masturbation is so often a private or covert event.
Is there an element of shame also involved in it?
Oh, definitely. At least some of the men I've spoken to feel that because it's not just will somebody come upon me and see what's happening, it's that I feel very much ashamed of what I am doing. It with religious prohibitions.
Yeah.
So the idea that I'm doing it lying down and I can, if you will, engage in some self-deception. It's just me rubbing, it's not me deliberately handling my penis that allows themselves to give themselves permission.
Correct. Doctor, you had recommended in your research paper that boys and men should be taught the correct masturbatory technique in a clinical or pediatric setting to avoid any sexual difficulties in their future relationships. Can you tell us what is the correct technique when it comes to masturbation, and why is it called the correct technique in the first place?
Okay. Correct would only, in my mind, be A, it's more normative, but B, because it doesn't tend to result in the problem that you and I are just discussing, the trauma that can result in inability to have
partner sex,
of it being penetrable, so having erectile problems, or orgasmic. So that's why one would recommend this other technique. The technique would be if one were to think about the, let's say, the internal combustion engine, the notion of a cylinder and a piston, with the penis being the piston, and if one were to hold one's hand to surround the penis, that would be the cylinder, and the thrusting of the penis, the moving it back and forth within the cylinder, would be the appropriate technique.
Okay, so basically the hand job.
Sorry?
The hand job, basically, with the hand job.
Yeah.
Or hasta maiduna in Sanskrit. We call it hasta maiduna in
Okay.
Sanskrit. Yeah.
I'll agree. I will challenge that, Sangeet.
Sorry?
I will not challenge the
True. Doctor, since masturbation is something that most people learn through self-discovery, do you think there is an appropriate age when children should be taught how to masturbate?
I don't know that there's any particular age. It's what I would think that whether it's a parent or a pediatrician would want to do is to be sensitive to when that child becomes sexually interested, not necessarily interested in terms of intercourse with another human being, but just when they tend to have questions about their body, or at least that part of their body. That would be a good time to be, if you will, instructing them or inquiring, as in terms of, tell me, do you ever get pleasure from your penis? How do you get pleasure from your penis? Those kinds of sensitive questions might be asked, even though let's say a parent or a pediatrician, and pediatricians might well feel as squeamish as a parent, it would seem to me it's an appropriate question and an appropriate place for instruction. Whether or not this could be taught in schools, in health education, sex education, that would be another place. It could be certainly in the States, that could be extremely politically sensitive,
Sensitive.
but
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
idea
Hmm.
that would be done.
But
As I'm sure people know, back in the U.S., Bill Clinton's administration with Joycelyn Elders,
exactly. Yeah.
that she paid a heavy price
Yeah.
for talking about, but
Yes.
none. It was right. Joycelyn Elders was right.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And she had to, as you rightly mentioned, Jocelyn Elders had to pay the price for telling that children need to be taught about masturbation. She lost her job. Bill Clinton fired her, of all people.
Yes.
So
Okay.
American hypocrisy at its best, I guess.
The working title for that original paper was Joycelyn Elders was right.
Oh,
but
okay. Then
but I did not think that it was going to be published under that. So I had to do something a little more clinical.
did you pass that to the publisher? Jocelyn Elders was right. Was the title? No.
No, I did not. Cooler heads prevailed before submission.
So this your paper came out 3 years after Jocelyn Elder incident happened, I guess, right?
That's correct. And it was very hard, I must tell you, to find a proper outlet for that, because even then there wasn't a whole lot of interest in hearing about masturbation. So I did submit it to the Annals of Internal Medicine, and like, I need to have something that was a little more selective, and that's why the Journal of Marital and Sex Therapy took it.
So even in the late 90s, there was so much resistance in even publishing a research study on masturbation in the US. It was difficult.
One has to learn from the cautionary tale of Joycelyn Elders.
Amazing. Doctor, ever since you published the study on PRONE masturbation, this has been nearly 25 years ago, right? A number of follow-up studies have been published by sex researchers all over the world talking about the dangers of PRONE masturbation in men. Even celebrity sex advice columnist Dan Savage had talked about its dangers recently. Yet, the awareness about this problem among sex therapists and sexologists continue to be very low. And many urologists and doctors are even skeptical about it. Do you think most doctors lack the rigor to keep themselves up to date and be informed about the latest scientific and medical research?
I sadly, yes. And one of the reasons is that sexual health is not necessarily a major topic in medical schools, or in in terms of the basic education of physicians, or in training programs for psychologists. Mm-hmm. And also that one has to then go into more subspecialties, for example, urology.
Yeah.
To get that. And even in urology, it isn't necessarily taught all that much.
Correct.
And also in the graduate training, additional training that psychologists receive, it isn't taught much. So it isn't part of the regular curriculum, regrettably.
Regrettably, okay. Doctor, apart from PRONE masturbation, are there any other problematic masturbatory techniques that can lead to erectile dysfunction or make people unable to have partner sex?
Yes, I believe that is the case. If I'm correct, that the problem arises from overstimulation, then, and I believe it was in the 98 paper that I wrote about someone who, a gentleman who did not have underwear, did not wear, and he was from a country where they, the jeans that they wore were from a very coarse fabric.
Okay.
So it was that level of coarseness and the persistent rubbing of his penis that I believe accounted for the problem, because he masturbated. When he did masturbate, he didn't masturbate in a prone position. Nonetheless, he had this problem. And it was happily rectified by teaching him the proper technique and the proper way of dressing so that he was willing to underwear.
Okay, okay. Doctor, do you think women also can experience sexual problems due to masturbatory techniques? Is there a female equivalent of prone masturbation?
I have not seen enough cases to tell you about the prevalence, but it is my suspicion that women, and I think my latest paper, which came, I'm sorry to say, 20 years later in Journal of Sexual Medicine, where I did speculate about the fact that you might see this in women, especially women who are using vibrators or other stimulating techniques that work, and we're talking about frequency and amplitude, that the extent of the rubbing against the clitoris, using that exclusively, that too, I think, could work to desensitize a woman.
Okay.
Now,
okay.
Totally going to have the same problem. She's not going to have erectile problems because there is no penis there. Okay. Have more of a difficulty in terms of achieving orgasm if she comes to accommodate to a very harsh form of stimulation, if you will. I wouldn't call it an abrasion, but very, very strenuous stimulation.
But we don't have any study as such of that. This is in the realm of completely in the realm of speculation.
No. I wish my colleagues, the ones who more often see women with these sexual problems, would look into that.
Okay. Doctor, there has been a lot of discussion recently. I'm sure you must also be aware about it in both US and the UK about the importance of doctors to be aware about their own religious and cultural biases when it comes to treating sexual difficulties. For instance, in the past, we have been qualified doctors campaigning against condoms, campaigning against condoms, saying that condoms are useless because they have tiny microscopic holes through which AIDS virus can pass, because it went against a particular religious ideology. Similarly, masturbation is regarded as a sin in Christianity. You know that. Now, thanks to over 2 centuries of Christian colonialism in India, even cultures like India, which never had a shameful attitude towards sex, have huge problems with sex. Okay, and doctors, like everyone else, are heavily influenced by the culture in which they live. So how do we ensure that doctors provide medically accurate and scientific information on sex without getting influenced by their personal, religious, moral, and cultural biases?
Wow, that to the extent that can be addressed, it warrants a Nobel Prize. But because people practice from a perspective. Just unfortunately, as politicians legislate from a certain perspective, and here in the States, unfortunately, judges also will adjudicate from a certain perspective, and that kind of perspective, or what you and I might call a bias, can result in poor treatment, poor judicial decisions, poor legislative, law. In this case, for practice of medicine. So the way in which one does that, if I were to design a curriculum, it would have the practitioner role play, how to describe the proper techniques, how to inquire properly, how to encourage. Practice can desensitize a practitioner so that they don't feel as squeamish about it.
So
they are squeamish. They're reluctant to raise these issues, especially because even if people are comfortable talking about sex, they're less comfortable talking about masturbation.
Correct.
So it becomes a real problem. But even so, I know any number of practitioners, frontline practitioners, we'll call them primary care practitioners, who are so reluctant to ask about sexuality. I'm afraid they are a distinct minority, even though sexuality is such an important part of being a human being.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
when when we're in school and we hear all about learning about whatever squirrels or fish, whatever, we do talk about their reproductive systems. We do
Correct.
talk about the elementary
Yeah.
canal.
Yeah.
About when it comes to humans, we don't talk first. Animals, fine.
And also there is a great reluctance to address sex when in the context of pleasure. The maximum we will venture into is in the context of reproduction, if at all there is some education. But the fact is, human beings primarily engage in sex for pleasure, isn't it? Not for reproduction.
That is correct. It is so hard to, for people to talk about the fact that why do we have sex? Primarily because it's fun.
Yeah.
But there's also the case. I mean, not being Catholic, I can only tell you that hearsay to someone who's not Catholic. It was that the church said that you have sex for one reason, and that's procreation. You don't have sex for reasons.
Yeah.
Well, allowed. Then.
Yeah. And that sadly reflects in the attitude of many doctors who adhere to a particular religious belief. And it becomes dangerous when they practice it in their profession as well. Like the incident which I mentioned about doctors talking about how condoms have tiny microscopic holes through which AIDS virus can pass. It is something which doctors used to say in India, in Kerala, for example. There are a lot of doctors who used to say that to defend their particular religious belief. So, this influence of culture, religion, which a physician has, do you think there needs to be a separate training session in the medical curriculum to make them, aware about their personal biases and prejudice? Then only they can approach sexuality in a non-judgmental way.
I do. I think your point is a very good one. I want you to know that, at least, where I practice, when we have continuing education, in other words, to maintain our license, we must take certain courses.
Okay.
So, for example, I practice in the Washington area, and the District of Columbia requires that there be diversity courses.
Yeah.
So that because we want our practitioners to be able to be inclusive in how they are practicing their specialty, and how they're adequately treating the population at large. Well, so too, I think it'd be very appropriate for continuing education to mandate that sexual education or human sexuality be part of that continuing education curriculum.
Okay.
Way getting people to be more comfortable with what makes them uncomfortable, that they can't be so sectarian and only practice that which makes them comfortable within their own religious beliefs. Anyway.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sank, for this episode. And it was a pleasure talking to you as always. So in the next session, we will be coming up with more interesting questions and topics we will be discussing. So that was wonderful.
It'll be my pleasure, Sanky.
That was Dr. Lawarence I Sank talking to you about problematic masturbatory techniques. I have also shared a copy of the treatment protocol for PRONE masturbation, advised by Dr. Sank, for the benefit of my listeners in the description below. So do check that out. Thank you for listening. Until next time, this is Sangeet Sebastian signing off for Vvox. Just sex, no prejudice.